Welcome to the Dedicated Show. I'm Kate Strachny, your host and founder of Dedicated. Today's topic is going to be all about AI readiness, and AI strategy. Now, before I bring on our special guest, I actually want to ask a question from the audience. I just read an article this morning about AI readiness, and the question here is, as you're joining it, just type in the percentage that you think of business leaders that believe that their company culture is ready for AI transition. Now, this isn't a percentage of how many are using AI. It's not a percentage of how many of them want to use AI. It was a survey of business leaders asking them, hey, how ready is your company culture? Do you think you're ready for an AI transition? So as you're joining, let us know in the comments. I'll wait for that. And as I do that, I'll let you know a little bit about our special guest here today. His name is Dr. Seth Dobrin. He's the founder and CEO of Qantm AI. He's got a crazy background, and I mean, I could spend a couple of minutes just reading his impressive background, but we will actually just bring him on stage and talk about what he's accomplished so far. Now, just a quick reminder again, this is a live show. So if you've got a question, if you have a comment, if you agree or disagree with what you're saying, with what we're talking about, put that into the chat. This is your opportunity to engage with each other, grow your own personal brand by leaving engagement comments and questions in the chat, and also an opportunity for you to ask questions directly from Dr. Seth Dobrin, who is a genius. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bring him up on our stage. Hello, and welcome to the Dedicated Show.
Hey, Kate, how are you?
I am doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So, for those who maybe are not familiar with you, I like to start with not only a brief background of, some of your big accomplishments and what you're known for, but also these days, what does your typical day look like? You wake up in the morning, and then what happens?
All right, so let me start with the background because that's a lot easier. The typical day is there is no such thing as a typical day. So, I mean, my background is I've been in this space for a very long time. So it goes all the way back to the 90s when I was working on my dissertation in human genetics, which we could spend an hour talking about what that has to do with this field. But after my PhD, I worked at Motorola, I worked at some startups, I worked at academics and some pseudo academics, so in research institutes, applying both the tools of genetics as well as AI, what we call AI today, data science, machine learning, what we used to call big data, to solve scientific problems. I went to Monsanto, where for the first 5 years I was there, I did the same thing. So applying solving genetic problems, biological problems, using the tools of genetics, molecular biology, and data science to solve, in that case, business, so product development problems. After 5 years, we had created such value for the company that they asked me to move from the product development pipeline or organization, research organization, we called it, into the main part of the business to generate the same type of value, applying the same tools to solve core business problems around supply chain, around manufacturing, customer marketing, the typical things you think about today. Also, this was a time when cloud was taking off. So this was 2011, 2012. So making a cloud transformation as part of this, moving to things that we take for granted today, like microservices, containerization, all these things. We were every startup's first customer. You name a startup that existed, before 2016, we were their first customer.
Wow.
And so in 2016, after 5 years of creating value, at that point, it was well over $20 billion of value that we had created at Monsanto. It was time for me to do something else. And I could either go take a completely different job at Monsanto, as you often do in corporate world, or I could continue doing what I had started doing around the data and AI, essentially chief data and digital officer. I could go do that somewhere else. Obviously, I chose to go do that somewhere else, which is where I left to join a tech company. In this case, I joined IBM initially as one of their chief data officers. And then eventually I became their first ever global chief AI officer, where I was responsible for AI strategy, AI execution across the whole of the company. And during that 6 years that I was at IBM, I was, a champion for a whole bunch of things, including, as you know, diversity in technology. How do you drive diversity? I started doing that at Monsanto as well. AI ethics, responsible AI. So really, I was one of the core drivers using that soapbox I had at IBM for responsible AI before it was really a thing in the marketplace, and pushing IBM's products that are market leading today in that space. In 2022, I decided to leave IBM and go start my own venture, Qantm AI, focusing on the parts of my job that I really liked and not having to do the parts that I didn't like. In a corporate world, there's always things you don't have to like. You do that you don't like.
Yes.
And so Qantm really focuses on really three things. It's helping organizations get ready for AI by defining and building an AI strategy, defining and building AI governance constructs, and making sure that the organization, at least the senior leadership, is educated to execute on both of those. So that's really what Qantm focuses on. And particularly our market is Fortune 500 companies and private equity firms and their portfolio companies.
So I'm assuming you're a little bit busy these days because everyone and their neighbor wants AI. And before I get into more of that information, I just wanted to remind the audience that the answer we're looking for here, in terms of, can you guess what percentage of business leaders believe that their company culture is ready for an AI transition? The reason I wanted to start with that question is because AI is sort of here, but it's not yet, and there's still this trust barrier. So I wanted to get your thoughts here first, Seth. What percent of business leaders do you think, and I know you've seen it all in your career, especially with your advisory role now, where you're actually talking to these people who are trying to transition into using AI and working on their AI readiness and strategy. So what number comes to your mind when you're thinking about this?
So I'm going to say, I didn't read this article this morning, but I'm going to say this article is somewhere between 30 and 40%. And my experience, completely anecdotal, is somewhere between 5 and 10%.
Okay, so it's interesting you say that. So the article was not from this morning, just for the record. I read it this morning, but it was from November 14th last year from Fast Company. And you're actually correct. So although 82% said that they think that, their board and leaders are receptive to AI, only 9% of them believe that their corporate culture is actually ready for AI. So you said 5 to 10%, and for folks out there, I did not tell them the right answer was 9. So you hit it right there. Why do you think there's this huge discrepancy between those who are receptive and want to do this versus those who think maybe their company culture or their company themselves are ready?
I mean, the implementing AI is easy. The technology part is relatively easy, right? Even finding the talent, while it's challenging, you put enough effort into it, you put enough money behind it, it's not that hard. Cultural change is hard. And a lot of implementation of any new technology, or most of it, is changing culture.
Yeah.
Everything from a core tenet of how I approach strategy is human focused and strategy first. A lot of organizations take a technology first approach. So we have AI, where do we apply AI?
Yeah.
And then think of the human impact afterwards. My guidance is always, okay, companies call me, like you said, starting November last year, what do we do with AI? And I'd say, yeah, I'll come help you. And then I come in and I say, you're asking the exact wrong question. Not what do you do with AI? It's what is your business strategy? How does technology help you accelerate or execute your business strategy? And what are the impacts that has on the humans that are involved in your business, whether they're your employees, your vendors, or your customers? And then mapping out your AI strategy based on that and tying it to actual value. So how is this going to impact your top line, your bottom line, because that's what your owners care about? Or in some cases, it's employee engagement, which actually is a top line and bottom line because it equates to retention, right? And so really tying it to value and impact to humans And there's two types of impact, right? There's impact on users. So there's users of AI and there's people who are impacted by AI, and they may or may not be the same people.
Right.
So the example I always use is you get a mortgage or a credit decision. You go get a mortgage. The user of the AI is the underwriter and the mortgage broker. The people that are impacted are those of us that are getting the mortgage.
Right.
Actually three completely different people. You need to consider them all when you're building the AI system, and not just go in and think about them afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned that culture is the hardest part, right? So you can throw money at things. It can take some time, but if you've got enough money, you can get the talent to come and help you. Why do you think that is? Is it potentially because people are afraid that AI is coming to take their jobs and they don't want to help speed along that process, so they might be resistant to getting AI implementation?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons for that. It's not. I don't think it's one. I think generally speaking, it's people don't want to change in general. People are resistant to change. You find a few people who like to drive change, but in an organization, people tend to like the status quo, especially when you get down to that middle management layer, because the status quo is how that's their power, right?
Yeah.
That middle management. And I had a boss at Monsanto who used to say that's the clay layer, because oftentimes the people at the bottom want to change, and the people at the top are driving change, but you can't get that change through that clay layer. And so that's really the hardest part. The other hard part is there needs to be a whole structure around change management. You need an actual program, and a lot of companies, when they're driving these organizational changes, don't invest in a change management program, and they actually don't assess what type of organizational changes need to occur. And that's actually one of the first things I do. Is I have a whole assessment that I do.
Mhm.
I go into the first thing I do is let's do a readiness assessment across across 6 different dimensions. One of them is organizational readiness. Another is architectural, data, AI, Gen AI, and compliance readiness, so that you have across your whole organization where are we having problems,
Mhm.
where are we ready. And interestingly, a lot of times the senior executives think they're not ready in one area, but they actually are, based on what where their organization is. And other times, they have blind spots, positive and negative blind spots, which it's just good to know.
Yes. So I was going to ask, how does that actually work, right? So let's say there's a big company that wants to hire Qantm AI for strategy, and you come in there and you say, we'll start with an assessment. What does that look like? Is it like several questions that you go around and ask the leaders? Do you actually test things? Does it take days, weeks, months? How does that process work?
It starts with a survey. I'm quite honest, it's a type form survey, and it's actually 6 different surveys.
Okay.
And the surveys have different personas that they go out to, based on depending on which one of those survey. And no, there's no one persona that would fill out more than 2 of those surveys.
Okay.
And that way you're getting a whole slice of the organization, so that you're kind of getting the right persona, if you will, to fill out the right one. For instance, a data professional is not really going to be able to accurately fill out the compliance survey.
Right.
And so, but the organizational survey, you're going to want to slice across the whole organization.
Okay.
And so you kind of take a random slice, and depending on the size of the organization, it could go out to 50 people across the organization, could go out to 1,000 people.
Okay.
And so that's what it looks like. And it's, completely automated. People take the survey, it goes into a database, get the results. And then I sit down with the C-suite and walk through the results with them.
Okay. Do you ever have a time where you sort of follow up with respondents, or is it an anonymous process where you just get the data?
So it's anonymous to the company.
Okay, but you see
I do tend to follow up with the respondents if there's something that I think needs to be followed up on.
like if they said yes to this and no to that and it's contradictory, then
Yes. Yep.
yeah.
So if there are things that are contradictory, I will follow up. Now, the senior executives are not anonymous, because I want to be able to show them where there's discrepancies. So the senior executives are not anonymous, but the rest of the organization is completely anonymous.
Okay. Interesting.
And I am releasing a shortened version that I will put on LinkedIn, so that people can take a shortened version of the assessment in the next.
Oh, to see like if they are ready for AI or
Yeah, it'll be like 25, 30 questions or so that they can go through and take the shortened assessment. And
oh, that's fun. And
yeah,
then everyone would be like, "Oh, I thought I was so much more ready." And then I
yeah,
feel like
yeah, and then
that's
of course I'll bug them afterwards.
yes, yes, exactly. Well, that's a great idea. I think I'm happy to, help share that once you have that on LinkedIn. So after you do the assessment, you know where they are and you sort of have a conversation with the C-suite, you know where they're going. What's the next step?
Yeah, after that, so I look at the assessment and I kind of have an idea of what I think they should do next. And I go
Mhm.
and I kind of review quickly, maybe spend 30, 45 minutes reviewing the assessment with them. And then I kind of go through and say, okay, let's talk about your business strategy,
Mhm.
and understand, what is the North Star of your business and what are the key objectives that you need to meet. And then I kind of lay out what I think they need to do. And then we have a conversation about what they think they need to do based on the results of the survey and my feedback. And then we map out a plan for what I want, what they think they want me to help them with, and where we can bring in other people to help them, because I don't do everything. And that's part of the value, is I'm giving them a comprehensive assessment, and I only help them. Man, I only have the capability to help them with a small slice of things. So they're getting a completely independent assessment for architectural capabilities, data capabilities, implementation, compliance capabilities. So I'm not there to sell them a whole bunch of things outside of helping them set up AI governance, structures and things like that. So it really provides the groundwork for them to have a complete program to move forward.
Yeah, it actually makes me think of a home inspection where I remember we were doing our first home inspection, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And there were lots of things wrong with that house we were buying. So I asked the guy, I'm like, hey, so where, do you have a recommendation of who can fix this and this? And he was like, no, 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 like I can't help you with that, because if I end up helping you with that, he's like, I'll just tell you there's a lot of things wrong. There's a conflict of interest. And not that you would do that, but it's good that you can provide this full spectrum of the, how ready are you in these areas, even though you might not be able to solve those, get them closer to their ready state. But I
I
guess you
do
bring
have
in
some people I
experts.
recommend, though. So I do have some people that I've worked with for a long time that I'll say, hey, these are, here's 4 or 5 different organizations that you can go talk to that I think do great work. But
Mhm.
um,
Do you do actual consulting, execution? What's the role of Qantm
it's
after
more,
this?
it's management. Think of it more as management consulting. So I
Right.
help build the AI strategy, and I'll help work with the line of, at the senior executive level. I'll work
Mhm.
with the line of business to identify the use cases, but I don't go beyond the use cases. Same thing with the governance. So I'll help identify the governance framework and then kind of help them build the policies, set up the governance board. I don't do anything beyond that. I do education for the C-suite
Okay.
and their direct reports and the board, and that's it. I don't do any mass education. So um, think of it more as management consulting.
Right. What about AI adoption, right? So if we were working with a C-suite of, let's say, eight to 10 people, and more than half of them love the idea of using AI and the others do not, do you support organizations in sort of bringing the rest along on their journey, or are you just sort of standing off until they decide to come forward with that?
Well, so the expectation is that by presenting this strategy that's tied to value, because one of the outputs of it is, here's the strategy, here are the use cases, and the use cases are all tied to a dollar amount. Work with the
Okay.
CFO organization, where here's the value, right? So here are the millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars that are on the table, whether it's cost savings or new revenue.
Yep.
It's a yes or no. It's a, it should be a no brainer, right? We should be doing this, or it doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Yep.
Or maybe based on the rest of the organizational survey, there's a whole lot of other things we need to do before we can even think about getting this value. Yes, it's a lot of value, but we either have to go buy some companies to fill in this gap, or we have a whole lot of work to do internally before we can tackle this. And
Yeah.
so, there's a whole spectrum.
So you've done this for what, almost 2 years now with this new company?
Yeah.
In the past, I guess 2 years, have you seen that there's more of a need for AI for cost reduction or increasing revenue? I know the aim is to do both, but is there more of a trigger of like, oh, we really need AI because of A or B? Which one would you say?
So I think companies are most interested in new revenues.
New
So
revenue.
increasing top line. That is harder to quantify, though, unless you're building a net new product. Because inevitably, when you're building these AI, the business is always going to say that, well, we would have done that anyway.
Oh, that is hard to do, right?
Right. And so it's really hard to quantify. Whereas if you're talking cost savings, you can draw a line in the sand and you can show it. I mean, it's very clear cut that these cost savings came from the AI. And so in terms of demarcating where the value came from, I try to steer people for the first few projects to focus on cost savings because it's much easier to demonstrate clearly this came from AI for the most part. There are some customers I've worked with where there was a clear opportunity to build a new product using AI that would clearly show new value. The other thing that that's really important is every company has a moat, if you will. And this is especially important with Gen AI, right? So every company has a value proposition, some core asset that completely differentiates them, whether it's their people, whether it's data, whether it's their, and you need to really focus your efforts on building these capabilities around that moat. So what are you really good at? And making sure that you are enhancing that using this new technology. So don't try and use this technology to fill in a gap unless you're going to go out of business because of that gap.
Yeah.
Right. Focus on what you're good at, what your differentiation is, and use this technology to further expand and differentiate yourself in that market. And if you do that, I think there's more opportunity to increase both your top and your bottom line simultaneously, as opposed to having to make it one choice or the other.
And I guess that's something you uncover during your conversations with the C-suite, right?
Yeah.
After the assessment is all set.
And you'd be surprised how many companies don't know from a data and AI perspective what their moat is.
Well, I guess that actually helps them all get on the same page as well, right? Having you in the room or you and the team just all talking about it. You bring me back to my consulting days. I remember all the confusion amongst, internal leaders of one company not being on the same page. I think that's actually one of the biggest struggles, the disagreements, the people aspect, right? People are people.
It is, and they just don't I mean, it's a space that a lot of people don't fully understand. So it's not, I think it's not even that they don't want to, it's not something that they've even thought about from.
And I guess that's part of the education that you provide for leaders, right? The art of the possible, what the potential of AI, right?
Yeah, and getting everyone on the same page.
Yes.
Even the definition of AI, right?
What is the definition of AI, Seth?
Yeah, so AI is essentially a marketing term, right? And so for C-suite and boards, it's how do you automate a decision, right? And so it can be everything from rules to machine learning, even statistics, to deep learning, to generative. So from C-suite perspective, they don't operations research or decision optimization, they don't know the difference. And companies like IBM and Google and Microsoft, we've all been guilty of using all of these things as AI as a marketing term. And so from their perspective, it's all of those things. If you want to get more nuance with technical folks, right, we can get into all the differences. But if you look at its core, right, I mean, it's all based on statistics, at least all the AI today. It's all probabilistics. It's all based on statistics. And so it is all related to a certain extent. So it's not too much of a stretch. And even if you look at some of the regulations, like the New York, Automated Employment or Automated Employment Act, it is Automated Employment Act. It refers to any automation. It's not just AI. And so even some of the regulators are approaching it that way.
I actually haven't heard about this act. Is this something that came out recently?
It was enacted about 18 months ago. It went into effect, I think, about 6 months ago.
So is this for displaced workers that were displaced due to AI, or what's the?
No, in New York, it's in New York City. And if you're hiring and there's any kind of automation involved, they have to let you know. You have to be able to opt out. They have to tell you how the automation impacted the decision.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
Even
I
if it's
completely
rules. So
misunderstood. I thought there was a new regulation about.
no, even if they use rules to sort CVs, they have to let you know, and you have to be able to opt out of it. It can't impact their decision.
Oh, okay, got it, got it. Oh, that's good to have, I
Yeah.
guess. So you can see what's happening back there. We had a question here because there are some risks, right, with implementing AI, and I think that's why some are hesitant to actually do it. And Ashish is saying data privacy slash IP is considered a risk with AI in companies. Do you feel that that's a valid concern?
So I think data privacy and IP are certainly a risk. Well, there are things that need to be considered while you're implementing AI. Absolutely. If you have appropriate AI governance,
Mm-hmm.
they're not a risk, and that's an important aspect of implementing AI. And I think you shouldn't be scared of it. People often think of AI governance and even regulation as a roadblock, but I think for innovation, I think it actually enhances innovation because it focuses innovation on the right spots. So the things that companies or societies think are worthwhile, as opposed to things that they think are not, societally or corporate, corporations or societies as well, within their ethos. And so I think, as long as you control those, you can monitor privacy and IP. Looking at some of these foundation models, so generative AI models, ChatGPT, all of these models are foundation models. Many of these ignored data privacy regulations like CCPA, so California Consumer Privacy Act, and GDPR, the European General Protection Data Act. When they collected this data, they have all been put on notice that they're likely in violation of them. A couple of weeks ago, the UK said that they had no right to violate copyrights in the UK. The US said that as well. So there's a lot of copyright issues. So there are intellectual property issues and data privacy issues with the existing generative AI and other foundation models out there. So those are real. But as a company, if you're building these, and as a company, if you're using these, I would not touch any generative AI or any AI model if I'm not fully indemnified. And so I encourage everyone, if you're buying models or using a SaaS product, am I indemnified? If not, sorry, I'm not doing business with you.
Right.
So because you don't want to inherit any of that risk.
No, that's a lot of risk.
Yeah. And so I'm not too concerned about it. If you look at that now, there is the EU AI Act that was passed, enacted last week.
Yeah, I saw that one.
On Friday. On Friday. Or Thursday. But the timeline is 3 years. And so for complete, enforcement, they're thinking this summer it will go into effect. And going into effect means that, the lowest level and the medium level, the requirements for that essentially go into effect immediately because there are no real requirements. But aside from monitoring for human harms and things like that, all the other requirements, there is a phased timeline. Oh, and also the banned use cases, you can't do those immediately.
Like facial recognition, kind of.
Yep, general purpose facial recognition and things like that are banned immediately as when those go into effect as well. But there is a 3-year phased-in timeline, and the reason for that is to allow businesses to have time to put them into effect, much like GDPR. But that puts us in 2027. But that gets into a whole nother issue. Some of the approaches they've taken, I think, are great for AI as we looked at it pre-November 2022. So before pre-trained models, so before foundation models. So foundations are pre-trained deep learning models, so lots of data. This controlling bias in these models was very good. The way they've approached these foundation models is they want to control bias in these models. Now, on the surface, that seems like a great thing, except that GDPR is an extraterritorial regulation. And if you are controlling bias based on European definitions of bias, this has impacts on the global world because there's different global definitions of bias. So bias in Africa is different than bias in Europe, which is different bias in South America, which is different than bias in China, which is different than bias in Asia, which is different in Southeast Asia. And so we're essentially getting into what I'm calling technological colonialism, and I have an article coming out in AI Business this week. So I have a column in AI Business.
Okay.
It'll be published this week on technological colonialism that talks just about this, because all the models are being built in the US and China, with the exception of some models that are being built in the UAE. But all those models that are being built in the UAE are being built by Westerners and Chinese people that happen to be at this institute in the UAE. And so you're having Western and Chinese morals inflicted on the rest of the world, which is technological colonialism.
I can't wait to read that article. You said it's coming out on AI Business later this week?
Yep.
Okay. We'll look for that one. Man, I have so many more questions. I know we're almost at time. If we can go for just a couple more minutes, we'll take one question from the audience, and then I'll have like one or two for you. Praveen is asking if we need to buy an AI PC to leverage AI capabilities. I don't know if those are out yet. I know Intel's talking about AI PCs, and what do you think? I know I use ChatGPT every single day.
I use the tools all the time. I don't know that you need an AI PC. I mean, Apple's going to integrate it into their phone. I'm sure Google's going to integrate it into their Pixel phone. I'm sure, Samsung will integrate it into their phone. I don't know that you need an AI specific device. I'm sure all over the next 5 years, user interfaces are going to change dramatically.
Yeah.
So that they probably won't be typical. They'll probably be like command line, chat type interfaces. So, I'm sure computer architectures will change to accommodate that, but it's not going to be anything that needs to happen overnight. So I don't know. I'm not for training models. Absolutely. There's, going to be we're already seeing customized hardware for each of the different model architectures being developed.
Such an interesting time, I'm telling you. It's like
it
every day something new is happening. And I mean, I'm going to get an AI PC just because I'm pretty sure they're going to come out. People are going to get them. And then like 6 months later, the newer, cooler ones are going to come out. And it's just going to keep going and going. Okay, I'll take one more from the audience before we wrap, because it's related to your technological colonial AI biases. So Saibo's asking, how are we able to defend the future from technological colonial AI biases?
Yeah, so I think the best way to do that, and I do address this in that article a little bit. I don't like giving problems without at least proposing a solution. I think there's two things that need to happen at least. So one is we need to make sure that there's more global diversity included in the building of these models. So right now it's a bunch of white and Indian and Chinese dudes for the most part that are building these models, right? We need more women. We need more, Black people, brown people, people from south of the equator, from Eastern Asia, right? South America, building these models, right? That represents society that they're being deployed in. The other thing we need to do is, I don't think outside of gender, bias should be controlled in the models. I think bias needs to be controlled at the outcome. So through, you can think of it as disparate outcomes. So in financial services and the medical field, they actually measure something called disparate outcome, which is where you're looking at, what are the differences between, A and B in terms of the outcome? Are they the same or, within bounds? And so, I think measuring the outcome, do you really care if the model is biased, or do you care if the decision is biased? I think no one really cares if the model is biased. I think you care if the decision is biased.
Yeah, the outcome is the important part. And I guess, we can have a whole other session just on the concept of bias itself and how we can avoid that. But I do know we're getting close to, we are over time. But I did want to ask you a couple of things. One is, what else are you working on? I know I was going to say we're still in January. No, we're early February 2024. What do you have planned for this year? Are you speaking anywhere? And where can people go to continue the conversation, or at least follow your content?
Yeah, so I'm pretty heavy on LinkedIn. So S Dobrin on LinkedIn. I am speaking quite a bit this year. So the next big conference I'm at in Saudi in Riyadh on the week of March 7th at Deep Fest and Leap. I'm speaking at AI Summit in June in London. I have some things in between those. I don't recall off the top of my head, but I have at least one thing every month that I'm doing somewhere in the world. I have my AI business column that at least twice a month I put something out there. So I have the technological colonialism this week. Next week, I'm going to put something on the EU AI Act that just came out this week about the timeline and all these things that we talked about. So yeah, follow me there, follow me on LinkedIn, and certainly join me at one of these conferences.
Great. And then for the companies that are all itching to hire you and Qantm AI, where do they find you? What's your website?
Qantm AI. And if people want me to speak, go to drssethdobrin.com and there's a form on my website.
Perfect. You made it easy. Awesome. Well, Dr. Seth Dobrin, thank you so much for being on the Dedicated Show. And thank you to the live audience who joined the session and for your engagement and your comments. All right, everybody, stay dedicated. We will see you online.